turn this on. Okay. Welcome to what for some of you may be the first installment of our Faith and the Arts Summer Sunday School class. The Religious Arts Committee at Spring Hill Pres has been hard at work putting together this outstanding slate of speakers for the whole summer. Our theme for the summer is Seasons Under the Sun, and we're using the connecting scripture of Ecclesiastes chapter 3, the poem that begins, "For everything there's a season and a time for every purpose under heaven." That's sort of the overarching theme of our summer. And we invite all of these speakers, some from the community and some from our own congregation, to jump in and to talk to us about seasons in their life and also what they're really excited about. I'm really excited that we have Lynn Oldshue as our speaker today. Lynn, as some of you may already be familiar with her work, but she is a gifted writer and photographer and journalist. She's written some important and even recently cover stories for the Lanyap here, one of our local newspapers. Lynn has also been doing some audio journalism for APR, covering what's going on here in Mobile, especially how folks in our community are responding to the increased need for neighborliness during this coronavirus season. And also a wonderful thing, and I'm going to do a quick screen share for you to see. Lynn is the creator and the mastermind behind a wonderful project. Let me share this screen, called Our Southern Souls. Our Southern Souls. And this is a pattern. I'm not sure how frequent. I guess, is it every day, Lynn, or maybe
every day?
Every single day. There's a post on. I pulled up the website. You can also find them on Facebook. But every day, then Lynn shares a picture, a photograph that she takes, and then the stories of people that go with those photographs, and she interviews them. Mostly in downtown Mobile, and then occasionally she goes to the Fairhope Pier and tracks down folks there as well. Other places also, but these are the stories of ordinary people. These are the people that you wouldn't be reading about in the paper, the folks whose stories don't always get told, but who have really powerful stories to tell. And some of them are full of joy, some of them are tragic and heartbreaking, but they're always, in reading them, uplifting. You hear about journeys people have gone through great difficulty to get where they are, or maybe the grief that they have losing a loved one. Every now and then she has these ones where she tells the story of someone's tattoo and where that came from, and just outstanding stories. And then in doing so, those of us who follow her on Facebook or follow the group get to know some of these people and get to follow their stories as they develop, right? So sometimes we hear sad news of someone who was interviewed months or years before, who maybe has passed away. Other times, someone who's just on the cusp of starting a new business, and then we get to see how that business unfolds. There was recently a man featured who was opening a food truck and really got the assistance of a lot of his friends to help him get started. Young and old, black, white, every shade of humanity and the full diversity of human life shows up here. And it's a really great gift. So I think some of that's going to be what Lynn's talking about. But I want you to see a little bit of what that looks like. So Lynn is a native of Mississippi, but she now resides in our area and lives in Fairhope, and is active at Fairhope United Methodist Church, right? I believe. So we're excited to have Lynn with us this morning. I thought, as just a real brief, just 2 verses of scripture to kind of connect a little bit what we're doing. When I think about storytelling, right? So biblically speaking, often the word witness, especially in the Gospels, to witness is to tell your story, right? To tell the story usually of what God has done for you, and the power of sharing stories to spread the good news is really, that's how the church was started. So I think particularly about the story. It shows up in multiple Gospels, but in Luke's Gospel, Luke chapter 8, tells the story of Jesus healing a man who he was in Gentile territory. He was a Gerasene, this man who in Luke's Gospel we're told was possessed by multiple spirits, and Jesus heals the man in this powerful way. And then the end of the story, the man who's been healed wants to get on the boat and leave with Jesus and his disciples as they're going back to Galilee. So Luke chapter 8, verse 38 and 39. The man who had been healed from the demons had gone and begged that he might be with Jesus. But Jesus sent him away, saying, "Return to your home and declare how much God has done for you." So he went away, proclaiming throughout the city how much Jesus had done for him. So telling your story in your home, in your city, is a powerful thing. And Lynn, I think, is someone who tells great stories, but also enables other people's stories to be told through all these different ways. So I'm going to stop talking, and we're going to let Lynn talk to us about some of what she's interested in and some of what's going on for her right now.
Well, thank you for that. And it was interesting going through, I mean, Souls, I do it every day and I'm so close to it. Then you scrolling through and showing all those people and bringing them right back. I mean, it's powerful and kind of takes my breath away still sometimes of each person. What if I'd never met them? So thank you for that. So I'm Lynn. Grew up on a catfish farm in the Mississippi Delta and always wanted to be a writer and loved people and never really knew what that was supposed to mean in my life until I got into my 40s. But I grew up, and I'm the poster child for white privilege. I grew up at a private school for most of my life. I was surrounded by everyone who looked just like me. And it never dawned on me of what I was missing and the world outside of just what I knew. I mean, I traveled and saw the world, but like just daily living, I was in my little bubble. And I started a magazine called The Southern Rambler. And a friend told me I should interview Vincent Lawson. And he's a Black photographer in Mobile who covered the homeless and the poor, two things that were completely off my radar. But I loved my friend, so I told her I would interview him. And that interview with Vincent Lawson changed my life. He opened my eyes. I got to have conversations with him as a Black man and me as a white woman that I'd never had before. And we became great friends. And we did a story about the bus riders in Mobile. And for months, I rode the bus. And the first day I got on the bus, I've never ridden a public bus. You know, they just look like rolling billboards with personal injury ads. But the first day I got on, I was terrified. I thought, there's no way they're going to accept me, this 6 foot tall, reddish haired white woman on the bus. They're just going to throw me off and ignore me. But it was the complete opposite. There was a community. As soon as I sat down and started listening, they started telling me their stories of going to chemo and going to school and going to work and how they depended for everything on this bus. They were going to get groceries. They could only go to the grocery store and get what they could carry home. And there was a community there that cared for each other and realized how important public transportation is and for the poor communities. And they gave me their stories. They wanted other people to hear and understand them and that their life mattered. And that was the biggest lesson I've ever had. I realized that the walls are all mine, that whenever I have fear, that the walls are mine. If I show somebody compassion, they're going to give it right back. So I wrote about them and was devastated it was over, because then what? Where do you go from there? And my husband gave me the book Humans of New York, where a guy in New York did this every day and said, this is what you need to be doing. So that was 4.5 years ago, and I've interviewed 1,585 people. I just counted so far, but I do it every day. And I've done it in Morocco and Cuba, London, around the world, or wherever I go. And people just want to know that their life matters and tell their story. So it has completely changed my life and how I see people. And it's the best gift. But there's the surprising thing for me was, I mean, I was prepared to be rejected. And people don't say no. I will walk up to them sitting on a park bench or standing on the corner. I've interviewed preachers, murderers, famous people, homeless people, people in prison. Some of those are arranged, but they just want to know and tell their story. It's like it's the play buttons there, just waiting for somebody to come listen. And so I've been surprised by how many people say yes. And it becomes deep immediately. There may be something about a stranger that they will tell me things they may not tell somebody close to them. And I love that. It's the biggest gift and honor to sit there and somebody in pain or celebration, or, we often, it's like, they say, how did you know I needed you today? It's like, I mean, it's the same for me. I learned lessons from them and I know that God put us in our paths that day. So it's very spiritual. So a couple of things I've learned from souls, kind of, people want to be heard. How many times do people go through life invisible, ignored? I mean, we all feel that say too. I mean, there's a loneliness. And as we get more and more on social media, we're losing that human connection. For me, that's what I'm fighting for with souls, is that human connection of eye contact, who are you, and those moments together where we are completely present. I made my list this morning. Another one, this has been big for me to learn because I'm so guilty of this, is we're all saints and sinners. Every one of us. I have made my own mistakes. I've got my own closet. Every single one of us are that. We're all saints and sinners. We're capable of great good, and we're also capable of doing bad things. We're a mix of both. And once we understand that about each other, it makes it much easier to accept. And but souls for me has become this journey of people who have fallen down or gone through the hardest things of life, and they get back up and what they do next. Because that's where the inspiration comes. It's how God uses what you've been through. You may still be struggling, but you got up this morning and you put your clothes on and you got back out there. And that's complete inspiration to me. I have learned to pay less attention to the news. It's crazy, getting crazier. But every day I get to find the good and the people that give me hope and where God is. I mean, there are amazing people in Mobile that are fighting for the good and starting and feeding their neighbors and caring about each other. And those are the people we don't see nearly enough, like Beth said earlier, as the invisible people. But the news makes me insane. But every day people give me hope. It's like, okay, on the ground, we're good. We just need to be listening and finding that for each other. One of the biggest lessons I learned, like, the walls are mine. And I never realized I had invisible walls. I was scared to approach people. I thought they were going to reject me, especially people who look different than me. But that's not true. I mean, every time I cross my wall and take my wall down and go to them and care and love and honesty, that's how they receive me. And I have great guilt and regret for most of my life where I never understood those walls and how many people I missed. But and just the love of all races. There was one time we were at Fair Hope Pier, and there were a group of Muslim women, probably 6 Muslim women, sitting at a table. They were just having a picnic, and the men were sitting farther away. And I thought, there is no way these women are going to accept me. But the voice, I always listened to my God voice, and said, no, go. And so as soon as I went down, they pulled up a chair. They expanded their circle, pulled up a chair, and gave me a cup of tea. And for an hour and a half, we talked about what it was like to be a Muslim woman in America. One of the best conversations I've ever had. And what if I had put the walls up and walked away? So, knowing someone's story breaks down fear. You cannot fear somebody if you know their story. And my kids, we're having this conversation with my kids a lot right now of, in mass, things look scary, but take each person by individually and know their story, because that's where love begins. If you know what they've gone through. I interviewed a child predator he was in the hospital. He's a pedophile, for one of the Lanyap stories. And I was scared going in, but I walked in and he told me his story of being abused by his grandfather, how his grandfather sexually abused his whole family. And I do absolutely condemn what he does. But man, after sitting there listening to his story and you understand where they're coming from, I mean, you have to love him too. I mean, God created all of us, but I think we're moving beyond listening to people and listening to their stories, and I think we're losing that. because every person around us has a story. And it's so easy to judge and make assumptions about them and fill in their own story for yourself. And again, like I've done this 1,585 times at least, and I still do that sometimes. I catch myself automatically filling in their story before I talk to them, and I'm wrong 100% of the time when I do that. And but we can't just assume we know somebody's story and write them off and put them in a box and put them away, because we're going to miss them. But it's the greatest privilege, and getting to know people and share their stories and watch the change that comes from that. And Souls is this amazing oasis of compassion. And every time, like Beth brought up Sammy, he's a blind man who built his own food truck. And a friend told me about him, and I thought, there is zero chance that's going to happen, but I'm going to have to go see this anyway. God works in crazy ways, and that blind man was building his food truck, and he was the most inspiring. He still calls me once or twice a week. And we had his food truck there at Mardi Gras. His dream was to have his food truck at Mardi Gras. So we pulled a Hail Mary, got it all together, and helped him get over the finish line. And I mean, he is an angel on earth, and we're trying to find him a guitar so he can play guitar. But every day it's inspiring. And then I get to write about domestic violence and sex trafficking. I've written about those for Lanyap. And those are the darkest, deepest places you can go. But there's hope in God in those too. The women who've been saved and have come out of that, and their faith. And that's stronger than anything I've ever felt. But then there's hope there, and that people can be saved, and that the good does come out of it. So I just love people and storytelling, and it's this middle ground. If we can keep building this middle ground, life is getting more and more polarized. It feels like by the minute, by the day. But if we keep holding on to each other and keep pulling back, I have a huge hope for Mobile that we can do better. So you want to ask questions? What do you want me to?
Yeah, so we've had a few people ask some questions in the chat. Some of this you already were touching on, but Dale here was asking, could you share some of the things, not only the stories, but some of the things you've learned from your most meaningful interactions, like the story of the Muslim women, for example, or other sort of, great takeaways you've gotten.
All right, well, I've got one from today. So this, I don't know if you can see that. This is today's story. This is Corey Penn, sorry. Corey grew up in Mobile. He had a speech impediment. He had a single mom. She did everything right. She took the bus to work and to take them everywhere. She gave everything to her kids. They went to college and became these great leaders. And so Corey is he's a director at the Kiwanis, the Boys and Girls Club, the Kiwanis branch, and he's a youth pastor. But his whole thing is the importance of one and unity. And he said, like, kids go to school together, but they don't fellowship together. And what happens in your community, or what happens when he hurts, I should hurt. And what happens when his community hurts, my community hurts. Like, we should all be together with that same pain. And just, that's true. And he's talking about, like, in a couple of his schools, like, they don't have playgrounds. In Mobile schools, there are some elementary schools that don't have playgrounds. Like, how are we letting those things happen? So it's getting a chance to understand issues like that. And then there was a girl, yesterday's soul story. She was a senior. She was a senior class president at Fairhope High School, and she gave the speech, and it was about the riots and the violence. And she spoke out about it. She said it could have been her uncle, it could have been her dad, it could have been her. And she used this moment and this platform to speak out in Fairhope, which was incredibly brave. Just getting to sit there yesterday and talk with her about it, of how did you do it, the evolution of the speech, and just completely inspiring of how this 18-year-old kid seized a moment and opened eyes.
So Judy Stout asks in the chat, do you ever, and I think she means, well, she said, do you ever speak with children about your experience with people? What kind of responses do you get? And I'm not sure if she means, and maybe both, like interviewing kids, but then also sharing your insights on breaking down walls through storytelling with children.
I speak anytime I get to do an opportunity about this, just because I feel like I owe it to the people who I cover to give them a voice. Yeah, I have spoken to maybe 1 or 2 classes, but absolutely would. Yeah, I mean, it's just as important to them. And I love interviewing kids. There was one class interviewed in Foley. It was a 2nd grade class, and they took this little dog named Piglet, this little blind, hairless dog. And she has a completely multiracial, multi-ethnic class. It was the complete rainbow in her class. But she used this dog and started this project where they sent letters to pets, and pets sent letters back. And the whole thing was, these pets are diverse, these pets are beautiful, these pets are all different colors, and we love them. We should do that the same for people. And they have like this whole wall of pets, and it's just the best way to teach kids. Like, a couple of animals had disabilities, but it was just beautiful watching these kids. And some of them, that's the only way they wrote or they read, is because of these letters to pets. So amazing.
So I've maybe just kind of like a process question on your, like, so do you typically interview like one person a day, or do you end up interviewing multiple people a day and some of those kind of sift through? Or how often do you interview someone who by the time you're done you think, no, that's not really?
That doesn't happen. And that,
Wow.
no, I mean, I interview 1 a day at least. Some days I get off, but usually 1 a day. Coronavirus, I tried to do people on the phone, which was good, but wasn't nearly as good, because I have to have that. My favorite's when somebody looks at me and says, I don't have a story. Like, well, let's see. And that's completely wrong every time. We all do. It's just some people don't recognize it in themselves. And it's such therapy of telling your story, and just even to a stranger, and processing it and watching them. Sometimes they have revelations, or they just understand things, or just is a calming of, once you let your story out, you don't become a victim of it.
So do you have like particular questions that you fall back on that tend to elicit stories or narrative more, or do you just, hey, tell me your story?
Well, yeah, I mean, I just walk up to people and say, I do this, the world's a crazy place, but the people on the ground are the good stuff. And I show them souls, and we talk through some of the stories just to make sure they know what they're getting into. And then I tell them anything off the record, I won't put it in there, and I'm overprotective of them. And usually it's just conversation and asking why, and just listening. And but always ask them what they're most proud of about their lives, and what's the hardest thing they've been through. I mean, it's just that it's nothing more complicated than that. So, I have crashed weddings and been there. I have, it's just moments of, like, there was one where these kids had driven from Starkville, Mississippi to just watch the sunset on the bay. There's like, we've never seen the sunset on the beach. And we were at college one day, and we thought, we're just going to do it. And they drove down, and then they drove back up. It turned out one of them, I knew her mother from Yazoo City. But it's just that too, the magic. It doesn't have to be the tragic. It can be, taking the last picture before your baby's born. And it's the whole tapestry of life.
Kathy Fountain asked in the chat, how often do you continue to have contact with the people after you've interviewed? And it sounds like some of them you stay in contact with, and others maybe not. How?
Some I do. Some I just check in with every now and then. Some have become very good friends. It's up to them how they want to. I check. Yeah. And some I'll never see again, and some they never know how much they changed my life. So.
Judy Stout's asking, because you mentioned some international interviews, and she said, let's see, how have your experiences compared between U.S. interviews and interviews in other countries?
In Morocco and Cuba, I had to have translators. And at first the translator, like, there'd be our tour guide and our translator. At first they thought, okay, this is kind of weird, but they got so into it, I'd have to say, hey, you have to be telling me what they're saying. They would start having these conversations themselves. I was like, no, you have to be telling me what you're saying. And they would get enchanted by it. And so wrapped up in their conversation and doing that, they would forget to tell me, like, nope, you have to keep me in on this. But as we interviewed a nomad in a cave in Morocco, and this man knew nothing about the rest of the world. All he knew was sun and rain and seasons and his goats and the women in the corner who were making things. But that was just crazy to me that, and then there was a little girl that ran up to us. She was the most gorgeous kid I've ever seen. And she just wanted to have contact because we're out there in this desert and she didn't get to see people very often. And she didn't know when her birthday was. She just wanted to see people.
All right, Susan Abrams says and asks in the chat, you've been able to transcend fear to connect with people quite different from you.
Right.
Interestingly, the people you reach out to seem quickly willing to be vulnerable and open with you. In your own introspection and observation, have you discovered anything about this common human us versus them fear and how this wall dissolves?
I love that question because it is so true of, it's just seeing our human sides. I mean, we start talking and it's not them talking to me as a wife. I mean, it's just, we're talking as humans. It's not, you know, we're talking about our kids. We're talking about, I had a conversation with a woman. She's a Muslim woman in Morocco and she's my age. We have the kids the same age. And we're talking about doing laundry and hating all of it. Like we just kept saying the same thing. Like, we hate doing dishes. We hate doing this. We hate doing that, but we love this. And I mean, just there's so much in common. And we really do just want safety, security, the best for our kids, the best education, put food on the table, and be safe.
You don't have to respond to this, but Lawrence Huey says it sounds like what you're doing sounds like pastoral care to him. So,
but it is complete ministry work. Absolutely, it is. It's therapy for them and me. I mean, it is my complete volume. I get desperate and crazy, and I go out and find souls and calm down. And people reassure me that. And it's so easy to find people, the little voice and and my kids get down on it. I live them in the hot car, they're on the side of the road. And, but it's been fun. My son, we've interviewed World War II veterans. My kid's a huge history buff. So we interviewed World War II veterans for a long time. And now he's on the civil rights, which I love. So like this past week, we got to find civil rights marchers. So we found a couple of cool ones we're about to get to do.
Well, folks, we've had a number of people asking questions in the text thread, but I'm also aware that that may not be as easy for everybody, especially depending on what kind of device you're on. So we can open it up now. If anyone has a question you'd just like to verbally ask, but you'll need to unmute yourself before you do. And if you've turned your video off, if you turn your video on so we can see you, and turn your microphone on or unmute so that you can ask out loud. Looks like Billy McLean.
Yes, I've been reflecting on just what's gone on this week and have great concern for our city and our country. I've reflected back on when you speak of growing up in the Delta, I went to school in Memphis. Best dancers I ever danced with were Delta girls. And one of the things that I've realized is that when I look back on my own life of growing up, I'm 84 and grew up in the 40s, 50s, and was in high school. And I realized that often I had racist thoughts, told bad jokes, even into my adulthood. But what I think really changed me, or at least got me off of dead center, was when I listened to stories. At a United States Christian Fellowship, 3,000 students in Athens, Ohio, I interviewed the black man, very distinguished looking, got on the Pullman, I was in the diner, and I saw him in worship, and I went up to him, and he was the black superintendent of schools in Escambia County. He had 2 little girls. He told me about taking them shopping. It was very touching. There were other experiences. So I'm just thinking you've got something that this world needs. You have shared the gospel with us, and I'm grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. And what you just said is everything of changing hearts, changing minds. I am so lucky. It was until my 40s, I didn't have these relationships, but I have relationships now with black friends who are my safe place. I can go with them with questions. I can go with them. They explain from their point of view. And when I hurt because what their kids go through, what they go through, then that changes everything. If we all had those people in our lives that it's real and personal, and I don't want you to go through this, I don't want me to go through this, how are we going to make this better? And that's where I have hope for Mobile, because Mobile gives us a chance to make those connections. It's work, but it's completely worth it, and it's the only way through this. So thank you for having open hearts and minds, and we do grow up with blueprints. I had them too, of being raised in the South and the way we think and the way we're raised, and we all have blueprints. I found a great therapist who's helped me get my blueprints back together. But it's true. I mean, everybody's got them, and not everything we know is, not everything on our blueprint's right. And part of growing up and is adjusting those and getting a new set of glasses to see the world. The best part of Souls to me is having a platform to give voices to other people. And it's your connection with them. I don't editorialize it. It's completely, every word is theirs. And so it's like you're having the conversation with them and not through me, but you're directly connected with them. And I think that's why Souls works.
Right, so I think I see Lanier Cawley and Dale Hare both unmuted. So why don't we go Dale and then Lanier.
So Lynn, I was wondering, because I can tell that you have been changed by a lot of the interactions you've had. And I have to believe that the ones to whom you speak have also been changed by the interaction with you and giving them new insights. So have any of those folks said something to you to let you know how that has changed them?
Yes. Sometimes it's as simple as, after we're done, they said, how did you know I needed you today? Or are you an angel? Did God send you? And like, believe you me, I'm not an angel. But it just shows those connections, how they are. But I've got several Black women friends who I've made through interviewing them first. And they are far sharper, far smarter, more accomplished than I am. But they have told me that I have to be their voice right now, because right now the world is not listening to Black women. It will listen to me more than it will listen to them, which rips my heart out, because they're the ones that need to be heard. But I'll go down fighting for them. And it makes me, I still cry every time I think about it, even have to say that. But for them, it's like, you've got to get out there and keep pushing, because they're not listening to us right now. But that's going to change, and they need to be heard, and they are being heard, but I fight for them.
Thank you.
Okay, how are you different from StoryCorps?
I've done StoryCorps. I did StoryCorps with JD Crow. He was my JD was my interviewee. StoryCorps, you come to them, but it's very similar. And I love StoryCorps. And I was like, dang, I wish I'd done that first. It's the same thing. Except you've got 2 people there interviewing and you're recording. But for me, I just use my phone and walk up to them. But it's the same principle.
That's what I was thinking. I have done StoryCorps. It's been a long time ago, that I did it. But
Who interviewed you?
my grandson,
That's the best.
it was my wife and I and my grandson.
Is that one of the best memories of your life? Doing that with him?
It was good.
Yeah.
Oh, I love my grandson. He and I are great still. So,
Yeah.
but that was done, oh, I guess 20 years ago or more when we did it. And no, it couldn't have been that. Well, it's about 20 years, I guess.
Yeah.
Because he's 3 or 4 years old or so when he was interviewing us.
He was 3 or 4 years old when he was interviewing you?
Probably in that
Oh,
range.
that's
He wasn't
sweet.
much older.
That's pretty great.
Might have been 5.
Yeah. That's great.
So, you know, Lanier, in hearing that, and I'm a big fan, some of y'all know of StoryCorps, whether sometimes they're fully cited and sometimes they're not, but y'all have heard a lot of StoryCorps stories in as sermon illustrations throughout the years. But I like that idea or that distinction of how do we, using these two maybe models as metaphors, how are we called to, like StoryCorps, create environments where people can come and share, and like what Lynn's doing, how do we also go out and find those stories that aren't coming and sharing them on their own? I mean, I think that kind of balance of those two, the open receptive, but also outward and seeking, and I think both of those models together. We've got a few more in the chat. Let me, Hilda, and this is just a logistic question, but I think she means it more than just logistically. Hilda asked, how can we get Lynn's message to everyone in the congregation? So the short answer for that, Hilda, is we're recording this, and we can, with Lynn's permission, to share it with those who couldn't be here. So we'll share this on the church's platforms. That we can use the same ones that we use to get our worship services out, so a larger group can hear this. Cheryl Hall says, I love reading your stories on Facebook. Do you know what happened to Patrick? She thinks is his name, the donut man at Schillinger and Airport. I've not seen him lately.
Patrick is an interesting one. So if you don't know Patrick, he's the donut man. During coronavirus, I had people submit story ideas. Several people submitted the donut man. He sells them on Airport and Schillinger. Interviewed him. It was right at his birthday, and that's probably one of the biggest stories we've ever had on Souls. The deal is he was a former drug dealer who started hustling, quit selling drugs, started selling water and donuts on Schillinger. Thousands of comments. I mean, a lot of people talk about how he'd given donuts away to them, just all the good things he had done. Somebody was so touched and he talked about wanting to have a dream of an ice cream truck. And someone was so touched that they set up a GoFundMe, and I asked him about it before. I said, hey, they're thinking about doing this for you. Were you okay with it? He said, yeah, he was great with it. And even like I talked to some of my friends, if we do this, can y'all help with the business plan? But I think they've raised $12,000, I think, in 2 days on that. And everybody wanted to give. But he ended up turning the money down because he wanted to do it his way. And I think people kept, I think there may have been a lot of pressure on that too. And which is completely fine. I respect him so much for turning it down if that's not right for you. We have not at all forcing anything on anybody. It's just there as a gift to help. And so I think he's been off and on out there. He's had some dealings with Krispy Kreme, and I haven't kept up that much with him since then. He'll get his ice cream truck one day. He's just going to do it on his own. But it has been neat watching. There's been times people have responded, like a single mom with 5 kids. People say, how can we help? And they've paid their light bills. And sometimes they just contact me with ways to help. And it's just, that Souls community is just love and compassion and how they receive stories. And the rest of social media is so toxic, but I can trust on Souls. I can throw them out anything. Hard stories, deep stories. You're not going to agree with everybody. You're going to some things you'll see and you'll relate, and other things that's not, I don't understand it, but people see the humanity anyway. And I'm so grateful for how souls are received, because the rest of the internet's so toxic and everything goes political so fast, but on souls, they just treat it differently. And it wouldn't work without the people who read it and the people who are there. I mean, it's just.
Other questions? Judy Stout looks like she's unmuted, and maybe Tim Holston was as well. So Judy and then Tim.
For many years, I was a reading buddy with elementary school students who were struggling readers. And week after week, getting to know these children through that effort and not prying into their private lives or anything like that, I learned most of their stories. And in many cases, they bothered me so much that I took those stories home with me. And I wanted to take all those children home with me too. How do you walk away from the stories when you can't really do anything to help?
I cry all the time. I cry in the car when I leave them. I cry after I write them. I pray for them. But I also cry over the good stuff too. I'm just a crybaby all the time now. But I'm working. So one thing we're doing, I'm about to work with United Way on this thing called the 2020 Pledge. Because just like you, I hear all the stories, and like I can't just leave it there. So we're about to this 2020 Pledge with United Way and raising money to expand all the programs I've learned about, things like you've done, and all the kids that are on the waiting list. How do we expand programs so they can allow more kids in, give the positive influences like you were doing? And so we're about to start that and painting a mural on the United Way. But for me, like, that gives me sanity. Okay, we're doing something. I'm not just telling stories and leaving them. We're going to do something else. So of souls, I'm going to feature families that either need to get into these programs or have been in them. So that keeps me sane too. Like, I know we're going to help some kids.
Perfect. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, but like you, I mean, you have to, yeah. So thank you for what you did reading with them. That's the biggest.
Tim?
Yeah, I just had a question that came to mind. You know, sometimes you mentioned that you sometimes interview homeless people. And, you know, when I see homeless people downtown, sometimes the thought always comes to mind, how did they get there? What happened to put them in this position? Have you had maybe one story that just surprised and touched you about interviewing a homeless person, about what journey led them to being where they are?
So there was one lady, and I think it's like with women, and like this is one thing I've learned through domestic violence, sex trafficking, is childhood sexual abuse, and how prevalent it is, how hidden it is, how devastating and destructive it is. But there was one lady, she's 58. She was just in the homeless story I did for Lanyap. But she'd been abused by her uncle when she was a child, never got help. And she said that's when she broke. But she went on the streets when she was 14 or 15 because that wasn't as bad as what life was at home. And she has, you know, she's been out there a lot of her life, going back and forth. But it just, so there's the mental issues from that. I interviewed a couple after coronavirus that lost jobs that, you know, were homeless at a time for that. Sometimes just they work and something bad happens. It's just that one last thing that sends them over the edge. Alcohol and drugs are a big problem out there. And there are a couple of them. So it's just, life's hard. They're not getting mental health help. I think that would help a lot of things. But you know, I interview every one of my interview, and I understand their life, and there's not throwaway people. You get, I mean, one of them had grown up through the child care system. He'd been in children's homes since he was 7. And he had the rosary that a priest had given him and a Jesus wristband. And he just was out there, you know, when he's clean and sober, he's out there trying to love people. And it's great. I mean, there's as much faith in God with them too. I mean, they cling on to it in the hardest times. And it's just, I think mental health issues are are far bigger a problem than we even realize. Did that help?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
But there's always, I mean, and they're always, they are, and it surprises me. I have some cry on me. They're so glad to have human connection and somebody to see them and care. Yeah, they don't want to be invisible. They don't really, I mean, most of them don't want to be there. And it's scary and dangerous being out on the streets.
I think we have time for maybe one more question. If somebody's got one that's burning that they're waiting to ask.
I want to say thank you too to you guys for being open-minded, and you're watching this because you care about people and you have a heart. And I know this, a lot of this is just preaching to the choir, but thank you for caring, and you make a difference. I mean, it really is one person at a time if we all out there and just multiply it. So thank you for having a heart for people, and just by listening, that says a lot about who you are.
Any last questions for Lynn?
I have one, Buzz.
Yeah, go ahead, Mary.
Good morning. Like you, I grew up in a bubble, and my bubble was burst when I worked as a child welfare social worker.
Wow.
So my eyes got wide open real quick. And I'm glad that you've mentioned your children. How do I keep my girls from being in that same bubble that I was in, and not make them go do child welfare work? But you know.
Right. And by the way, I see Stig Markison behind you. I've interviewed Stig before.
Oh yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So, and I'm doing, my kids go to a small private Christian school, and it's good for them, but I also am very conflicted about it.
Mm-hmm.
And so my kid this week, my 16-year-old, was asking tough questions. So I've got my Black friends. They're going to take him to lunch. He's going to get to ask them all the questions. It's about those personal relationships. They have to feel it for themselves. It's just putting them in places where it's easy and natural to make those friendships. Because I'm conflicted right now, because right now most of my kids' friends group is very white. But they're very aware, and they've seen the world, and they know what I do, and I feel good about them, but they're also going to have to make those relationships and connections themselves and understand it for themselves. So that's my next step with them, is really helping them make those.
Okay. It is something you have to.
Yeah, it has to be intentional. Yeah. Because it's easy to just keep going on with the flow of where you are. I mean, sometimes you do have to take a step out of your river and your comfort zone and make it intentional, but it's so worth it.
Well, Lynn, thank you so much. The number of other folks in the chat who have been saying thank you and giving gratitude for not only both your presentation today, but also your work and your witness throughout all these other days. One in particular, Sarah McGow points out for everybody, you can go vote for Lynn as the favorite local content creator for the NAPPY Awards. If you're aware of the NAPPY Awards, is the community voted on awards given by the Lagniappe magazine. So go track down how to vote for her and as favorite local content creator. Certainly favorite content created in Sunday school class for us right now. And keep reading and checking out Our Southern Souls, both the website or follow them on Facebook. And pretty much, yeah, anything Lynn does, you want to read. That's been my experience.
But there's the advantage. This is exactly, I searched for most of my life of what I'm called to do, got close to it or something, but like, this is what God created me to be. And I love it. And I'm so grateful. And it is, I mean, so many times it's not anything I did, it's what they do and the stories. I'm just a listener and the storyteller and this little part of the vessel. But I'm just so grateful for every single person who gives me their story and their time. They have no idea how much they changed me.
Thank you, Lynn, so much. Just a few quick wrap up and things to let you know about, and then we'll close with a word of prayer. The first, pastoral care, just some of you saw, may either have heard through the grapevine or saw in the churchwide email that went out Friday that listed pastoral care concerns. But early Friday morning, Nancy McCrumman passed away after obviously years of battling with this illness, and especially the last few weeks had been particularly difficult. So please keep, of course, Norman and the McCrumman family in your prayers. The other is, if you hadn't seen, I'm assuming if you know enough to be on this Zoom call right now, you're also aware of our worship service today. So you don't want to miss worship at 10:30. And again, you can join that, like is the case already, either through the YouTube link or through Facebook. But I'm very excited to welcome Reverend Christopher Williams. Some of you have met Reverend Williams in other contexts. We've done a few things with his congregation, Yorktown Missionary Baptist Church in Africatown. But Chris will be preaching for us this morning, and we're continuing our summer series. And it just happened to be that this week, as we go through these poetic pairings in the book of Ecclesiastes, this week the pairing was a time to kill and a time to heal. And so Chris is an African-American pastor who also comes with, I think, about 3 decades in law enforcement before he retired. And so brings a strong and important perspective for us to hear. And he's a great guy, and he's a great, he's a good friend and colleague here in town. So I'm excited for our church to get to worship together, even when we're apart, together online, and for Chris to be the one who's bringing the witness today as well. So that's, let's see.
Hey, Buzz.
Yes, go ahead, Lanier.
Is he bringing some music with him?
Not.
Is he
no,
bringing
yeah.
some
So
good,
no,
music with him?
Not from his congregation, no. But also today, our guest musician and cantor is Mary Bradley, who is one of our Newberry singers, recently new member of the choir, student at South Alabama, and she is outstanding as well. So you don't want to miss her. But no, I'm hoping, and as some of you know, Chris and I personally have developed a relationship and done some work together, but also we've begun to have our congregation be a little bit more involved with some of the work in Africatown and what they're doing. So I would love to, one day when this coronavirus situation is over, to do maybe some more pulpit swaps, or maybe some choir exchanges or musical sharing. That'd be outstanding as we try to develop this congregation to congregation relationship. We as Presbyterians, we believe that we are a connectional body. We don't think that we've got it all figured out. Lynn sounded very much like a Presbyterian when she said we're all saints and sinners at the same time. I think she maybe
applies to Methodists.
That's right. Yeah.
And
yeah.
most of my family's Baptist, and I know it applies to them.
That's right. So being part of the body of Christ that is broader than just ourselves. I'm looking forward to today maybe being a pivotal moment in us continuing along that journey with this sister congregation over in Africatown. So we'll close right now our time together with a word of prayer, and then get ready to gather in worship remotely soon. God of grace and God of glory, we give you thanks that you have created us all in your image, and that as your art forms, you have given us voice to speak, given us ears to listen, given us the gift of creativity and art to express a truth that is deeper than ourselves. We give you thanks for Lynn Oldshue and for the work that she is doing, for all the voices that are lifted up through Our Southern Souls and through her work in journalism. We give you thanks for all those who are finding new ways to lift up the voices of others at all times, but especially in this time. Continue to open us to widen our moral purview as we see more and more the vastness of your love, the wondrousness of your grace, the amazing and surprising good news of your gospel. Help us to leave our encounters with you transformed as we continue along the journey of faith, walking side by side with all the sinners and saints who have gone before us and who accompany us still. This we pray in the name of Christ, our Lord and Savior. Amen. All right, thanks everybody, and we'll see you in worship real soon. And thanks, Lynn, especially. That was wonderful.
Oh, this is great fun. Thanks. Good to get to meet everybody. So,
Bye, y'all.